Greetings, good people of YouTube. Today I'd like to weigh in on Pedo-Podesta and Hillary Clinton, specifically John Podesta and his connection to people like Hillary Clinton and her connection to people like Monica Peterson, who was investigating children being kidnapped in Haiti. And it's my opinion that those children that Monica Peterson was investigating were connected to the Clinton Foundation through their activities selling parentless children to people in the Middle East, people in Belgium, stuff like this. And I also want to kind of issue a warning. I should have said this first. One, I don't like the Pizzagate label. I think it's a deflection from what's really going on, which is a global epidemic of child abuse at the upper echelons of many governments. Also, I think it's very good to have healthy skepticism against anybody who's accused of these kinds of nefarious activities. A person is innocent until they're proven guilty, but people who are presumed to be guilty or suspected to be guilty of crimes are investigated properly and thoroughly. And that's where we need to focus on, I think, with John Podesta specifically and James Alefantis. They need to be investigated appropriately by competent organizations who can do the correct kind of forensic analysis of certain things. There's that video going around that people say is John Podesta. I saw that video actually a few months ago for the first time before it really was making its rounds on YouTube, and it was disturbing enough for me to file a complaint with the FBI and request that they look into it. I know a number of other people did the same, and that sort of led into where it's at now, where I guess some amateur forensic analysts have decided that the voice in the video sounds a lot like John Podesta, and potentially even claims he is John Podesta. Again, I looked at the metadata for that file and I didn't see any smoking guns, and so I'm personally a little bit skeptical, but also ambivalent. I can't draw a conclusion. I do, however, think that John Podesta needs to be thoroughly investigated. He seems like a total creep based on the things that he says in his own words in his emails. And this is what's most disgusting to me, specifically related to the most recent interview he did, where they don't even ask him those questions at all about why are you using language that's known to the FBI to be pedophile code. These are your own words, Mr. Podesta. Why are you using this kind of language if it doesn't mean the things that people suspect it means? How did you come across using this kind of terminology? Why is that the thing to do in your little circle if it isn't to obfuscate what you're really talking about? Instead, they paint him to be really this innocent victim of all of these evil deplorables who really only want the best interest of children to be acted upon, to be the name of the day. So I think the interview was a total scam. It seemed to me like he was really nervous, like he didn't want to talk about the subject. It seemed to me like he was being goaded on by the interviewer at a number of points within the interview. And I think that the man really deserves an honest investigation by competent people who can say, or who can either confirm people's suspicions or lay them to rest such that the majority of thinking people can see for themselves that there's nothing bad going on here and that this whole topic needs to be let go. So that's sort of my thoughts on that. But I also want to point out too, in light of healthy skepticism, there are two things that I'd like to bring to people's attention. If you're a total skeptic of the whole pedogate thing and you think it's total bunk and you don't buy into it at all, one, look into the Westminster Dossier that broke in the UK, I believe in 2012, where lots of high-ranking members of Parliament, local government, and police forces were investigated because they were running basically a prostitution ring where they were providing young boys to these high-ranking officials for prostitution. Mostly low-level people were arrested and convicted, and all of the upper people who were really the ones who were implicated, nothing ever came of it. I don't know if they paid off judges or if they just let the media sweep it under the rug until people forgot about it or what. But it seems like, to my knowledge, nothing really ever came of it, and it was sort of left very open-ended. I think a lot of people here in the United States would like to see that not happen with this current instance that we are finding out right now. Also, related to the United States, if you don't buy into this, look into Nancy Schaefer, the congresswoman from Georgia, I believe it was, who was murdered in 2012. Her murder was ruled murder-suicide. Both her and her husband were found dead in her home. But she was following the money trail that led through Child Protective Services and exposed some of the corruption that was going on there, essentially pointing out that states and Child Protective Services within each state had a really high incentive in terms of taxpayer funding to their organization to acquire more children. They had quotas to meet every year in order to achieve their funding, and there were bonuses given if they went above those quotas. So there was a huge incentive to collect children into Child Protective Services. And she was working really hard to expose this. She lost re-election in 2012, and that gave her the ability to really focus her time on that issue. And it's my belief that she was going to break some big information, and then she was murdered. She was about to give a speech and unveil some things that she had been researching, and all that research disappeared, and her husband were both dead. So those are two things for the skeptic to look into if you really don't buy into it at all. Westminster Dossier and Nancy Schaefer. Thanks for listening. Stay safe.